All right, so we will start with the stages of treatment, and there are a decent amount, and people can occupy these throughout the different sessions that you have with people, regardless of whether they're regressing or something new comes up. You can get into these stages pretty different times, and things can go pretty off the rails when you do them. So, the first one is engagement, and I always say it's engage. You want to engage, meaning you put forth action into what is possibly going to happen. So this is where we're starting to establish rapport, and we're starting to get to know the client and what their viewpoint is and their conduct within themselves. So this is where we're going to start getting the client's perspective, where they're coming from, what works for them, and how they communicate. So you want to utilize this and compare it to the acronym that I have people utilize. This is going to be the feelings level. You're going to get their subjective point of view of what is currently going on with and for their situation. So this is going to be the strengths that they can identify. These are the particular resources they're utilizing or that they have interest of, the supports that they have within their life to help them conduct and navigate themselves, as well as their motivation for change. And this is going to be huge because even though they bring up a particular topic area that they want to change or things that they want to address, if they're unmotivated to do so, those aren't going to be things that you're going to be able to walk with them here. So the main thing to remember in the engagement stage is this is starting where the client is, because it's the first initial contact that we have with them. Or again, let's say you're working with a substance use client and they relapse. We may have to try and re-engage them in some way, shape, or form because they've gone off of the plan that they once established. And that is where we have to engage them and get their perspective of the situation once again. So the goals of this stage is to gain the trust of the client and start establishing a rapport with the clients. They get to know us, we get to know them, we get to see if we can mesh and walk the path together. So we want to identify the client's view and what they would like to gain from services, as well as what they have currently been doing within their situation. And we need to gauge the client's motivation for change. So again, if someone brings up like 5 different topic areas, so for example, I'm experiencing depression, I'm utilizing substances, I want to improve my communication, and I want to get different housing options, but I only want to focus on my depression, we're not going to be able to tap into those other resources and those other avenues of change because they're not motivated to do so. Again, the way that you engage is the way that the work together with you and the client are going to pan out and how it is going to be utilized within this. So when we're inside the exam and looking at questions, again, I utilize the acronym, but the stages of treatment can also help with this as well. If it's your first initial contact with them, we always want to make sure, one, they're safe, but this is in the stages, but we would have to get their point of view so that we know how we can best help them, not us tell them what is the best for them. So the way that you engage or the way that engagement is done can either make or break how the situation is going to go, which then leads us into needing to do the second stage, which is assessment. So this is where we're going to assess or gather more information about the client beyond what their specific point of view is. Because once we have their point of view, we now need to get what has been done before and what they would like to see out of this and how we can help them get it done. So this is where we need to gather the more like historical and concrete information about the client, things that aren't subjective, more objective type view. And again, synonymous with the acronym level of assessment, which is getting the objective point of view of the client situation that is unchangeable. So the identifying information is utilized so we can best understand what their situation looks like and what they would like to get out of getting services with us. So it helps us identify their goals, what they have to get there, and what supplement needs to be put in place. So this is where we're going to start exploring what the client has done before and what impeded their progress. If you've had a previous treatment history, what was done before, so that way we don't have to try to reinvent the wheel or do something that did not work. Or again, if something was close to working, we need to polish it up and make sure it gets done the second time, or maybe the third or fourth, depending on how long it takes. But this information is needed to give us the picture that the client may not be telling us. So this could be, again, be like their treatment history, their substance use, their medical, the resources they have, the strengths that they have. Do they have a legal history? Are they taking medications? What different components of their life could impact the treatment process, and what barriers could be foreseen prior to engaging in this? So this is going to be the information that you typically gather at like an initial assessment or an integrated biopsychosocial assessment. So that way we can understand what is actually going on with the client. So once we have their subjective point of view and the objective point of view, we can now adequately start addressing things and walking with them in this journey. So the goals of this stage are to gather additional information to help the client reach their goals, to better understand what the client brings and where they have been prior to engaging in services. So again, we don't reinvent the wheel, or we don't supply unnecessary things, or we may need to provide more that the client is not telling us in the first initial contact. And this is where the social worker and client get on the same page of what are you bringing in, what the heck's going on, and how do we get you to where you need to go. So I often say this is like the walk with the client to get to know them type deal. You're walking in their shoes a mile or so that way you know what it feels like to be in them. So after we have all of that information, we now need to get into the planning phase, which is going to be the plan of action. So now that we've gathered all the information, this is where we need to slap it all together, make our own little Frankenstein, and help it operate and navigate into the world. So this is where the client and social work collaborate together, and we're going to key emphasis on collaborate because we're not going to be telling them everything that they need to be doing. They are telling us what they think is best for their situation, as well as we're providing feedback as well. But this is where we need to get steps, like a recipe, to the client to help them get to the goals where they would like to be or improve their situation in some way, shape, or form. So this is where we're going to utilize the previously identified resources, strengths, and supports in the prior stages, such as during the assessment or even maybe during the engagement, who brought them and what can they contribute and who do they want to be included to help improve the client's situation or help them get closer to the goal that they want. Those are kind of synonymous here. And this is where we're going to address or identify the potential barriers to the client's progress and attainment of their goals. Because when you're planning something, you want to think of all of the possibilities on the forefront. So if you're going on vacation, you're going to think of what you want to do on vacation and what could possibly impede those things. And of course, there's going to be things that come up like maybe you forget your toothbrush, maybe you forget your suitcase, or your suitcase is lost. But this is the plan that we hope things could possibly look like. So we're going to identify practical steps the client can take to get where they would like to go, which their final destination is the improvement of life or a goal or goals that they see for themselves. So this is essentially the blueprint of the client's progress, because without the practical steps, the client is just going to be doing the machine gunner technique and just hoping to do something that hits something that could get some quality of changes in their life. So the main goals of this stage are to establish a treatment plan with the client to have a framework of the service or further services to make sure that, again, we're not just randomly throwing services here and there. It's systematic, it hones it down, and it gets things done. And we're going to collaborate with the client to identify steps to help empower the client to achieve their goals. And this is where we need to identify barriers to the client's goals and ways to combat and overcome them. And if you've noticed, you guys can almost do this with your study prep. The way that you need to engage with yourself is what is your point of view of what the exam is for you. The assessment is what materials do I have? What am I getting out of the materials? Or if I've done previous attempts, what have I done that's worked? What have I done that has not worked? And then the planning would be the practical steps to get you closer to where you want to go, which is passing the exam. So that is an easier way to like conceptualize it based on your own particular experience. So after we have gathered the information, laid the groundwork, we just have to do the dang thing, which is the intervention, which is the initiation of the plan. It is the first steps that we are taking to get to where we want to go. So this is where the client, again, the client utilizes their strengths, resources, and supports to get where they would like to go. The social worker is not doing anything. The client is doing it because it is the client's journey, and the client has to reap the benefits of what they would like to see, because the social worker is not always going to be around. So this is where the client and the social worker address barriers or struggles the client experiences when they are working towards change. So if you guys have ever tried changing a behavior in your life, and if it's maintained over long term rather than the average like 2-week little stints, you are going to hit resistance or going to hit things that are going to challenge your motivation. So this is what we are going to do and help them combat. And this is where the client is going to put forth effort to help get their situation to look what they want to see for themselves, again, which is their identified goal or goals. So this is what people think of when they think of their job. Like if people are conceptualizing what their job looks like during the exam, this is the step they're always looking for in the questions. That's why a lot of people will jump to actions pretty quick, because they conceptualize it. They're like, well, this is what I would do with this client at this given moment. Or if I'm your case manager, you're like, here's all the resources and the things that I would currently do with and for them. But if you've noticed, this is just one step out of everything. So this is where we're going to be utilizing therapeutic modalities or techniques to supplement the client situation or help the client view their situation in a different way than they already do. And the goals of this one are for the client to improve their situation and accomplish their identified goals with the assistance of the social worker, but the effort is put forth by the client. It's to help the individual, their client, to become more independent of the services or additional services by improving their situation or obtaining things from the services, so that we work ourselves out of a job. So this is where we're walking with the client to make the changes they want to see and address any issues that arise with and for them, so that way they can continue to have sustained progress and improve quality of life, again, through the attainment of their goal or goals. So after we have gathered all of our data, developed a plan, initiated the plan, we then need to evaluate and see, how did this go? So this is where we review what the social worker and the client have done throughout the time together, which again, we had the plan, we had the intervention phase. Now we have to look back and see what was the result and did we accomplish and kick butt? So this is where we're going to be checking in with the client to see their point of view on what they would like to see for the future, whether they would like to get on with their lives and get out of services, or if they're like, wow, we missed our goals and I still want to keep trying in services, or I didn't accomplish my goals and I'm just going to drop out. So this is where we're going to be identifying the pros and cons of the work that the social worker and the client did, and receive feedback to obtain improvement areas or to enable future work or outcomes for the client and or social worker. So this is like a two-way street of what were good things that happened that the social worker did to help the client, and what were good things that the client did to help the client, or vice versa, to help the social worker to develop experience in some way, shape, or form and help other clients in the future. So this is that transparent, like, how did things go? Where's the blame go? And where does the success go as well? So successful treatment, quote unquote, it would be lower level of care or discontinuation of care. So if they've met their goals and they no longer need you, we're not going to restrict them and hold them there. We're going to let them be birds and spread their wings and fly away. Unsuccessful work, quote unquote, could lead to the same level of care or continuation of the current level of care, or you possibly may need a higher level of care because we weren't adequately addressing all of the barriers and all of the services they could have possibly needed in their situation. Because again, the objective is to have the client improve their situation or accomplish their goal or goals in some way, shape, or form. And we want to have them to continue keep striving forth rather than regressing back or not hitting what they would like to do. So goals of this are going to be identify positive and negatives of the social worker and client's work together. Again, we're not just going to be dormant and be like, all right, have a good day. No, we're going to reflect on what we have done. So that way, sometimes clients don't recognize all of the positive things that they've done in treatment, and they just think that they've achieved only one thing when multiple things could have been done, or they may not know how to continue it. So being able to evaluate and identify positive things that have occurred so that they can continue on in the future. We want to understand the client's view and where they would like to go in the future. Again, do we need to have some aftercare? Do we need to have higher level of care? Do they need no care? Again, getting their view to make sure that they were best served, or if they were underserved, how do we get them adequately served and get equity out of them to be able to get that? And this is where we get an overview of the previous 4 steps, how we did, and did we miss the mark, or did we hit it and make it explode? And then after that, we then need to terminate if they no longer need us. So I always say, the easy way to remember termination is the term is up, meaning I'm no longer needed. So this is where the social worker and client part ways, because the client has met their goal or goals. And again, if there's no need for services, then we are gone. The social worker and client will develop plans for the future that the client can refer to, so that way they have continuity of care. And that way they maintain their progress rather than achieving something and then regressing and having this complete loss of what they could have maintained. So this is the final check-in to obtain that final feedback and review of what has been done to make sure that there's no unturned leaves and that the client has at a spot where it is ethically and appropriately okay to say, you've completed, well done, we killed this thing. So I always say, this is basically, my term is up, mission is complete. I take my hat off. So the goals of this stage is to understand the client's future plans to maintain progress, because again, we're not just going to have them get to a point and be like, all right, have a fun time, maintain this on your own, peace. It's what is it going to look like for you after you've done this? And what are ways that we can combat potential barriers outside of what you have already identified and overcome and combated? So this is the end of the therapeutic relationship. But again, we have to do it in an appropriate and ethical manner. We don't need abandonment. We don't need some, if they still need care and we're discharging them unethically, bad moves, bad vibes. And we need to ensure the identified goals were complete or completed as evidenced by the client feeling as if they were completed. Or if it was a tangible thing, you've tangibly completed this and there's no need for me to have you still in services. So those are the stages of treatment. Now we're going to get into diversity in social work. And I always caveat that yes, we can identify these nice categoricals and like generalizations and themes amongst groups of people, but always start where the client is and let them tell the story without filling any gaps or influences that we believe the client should be exhibiting or should be experiencing. Again, utilizing the acronym, that is the feelings category. Again, I will preface and keep saying that we can have these nice little generalizations and themes that we often see, but start where the client is. Don't tell them where they should be. And let's rock and roll. So starting off, culture simply can be defined as like values, ideas, traditions, and behaviors of a particular group of people. So this could be clumped into race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, occupation, gender identity, religious beliefs, socioeconomic status. Anything can be considered a culture if we want to get so minute as anyone that's wearing a Detroit Lions hat would have a Detroit Lions culture. Or for another example, this study group in particular, we all have one interest, and that's to get better acquainted with the stages of treatment, as well as diversity in social work. And if we want to get even further, we all have the goal of passing that freaking ASWB exam. So we have a culture amongst us. So when we define it in such vague terms, it can open your mind up to, yes, we have a whole bunch of people, but we have to let them tell their story in particular. So this is entirely influenced by the people who make up the group. It can be changed depending on the views of the people present at that given moment. So every Sunday I have a study group, but every different time the culture is different and the makeup of people is totally different. We're going to have some commonalities of people that have been in multiple groups. But again, the only main commonality is that Phil is at the helm, because that's just how it is. But again, different values and different ways of people doing things and different questions that get asked dictates and determines the culture and overall theme of it. So generalization can be dangerous, but it can also be helpful to get people shared experiences and help people relate on different terms as well. So what does it mean to be competent? Competence is an indication of knowledge regarding a particular topic area. So the knowledge, attitude, and skills that enable people to be effective within multiple cultures of interest or different areas. So you guys are all competent in social work. Some people are more competent in cognitive behavioral. Some are dialectical behavioral. Some people are more case management competent. Some people are just competent in like geriatric. Some people are like adolescent. Some are little kiddos. Some people are adults. All of you have some competence in something in some way, shape, or form. So when we blend together the word cultural and competence, we get the process in which individuals and systems respond respectfully and effectively to people of all cultures, languages, classes, races, immigration statuses, backgrounds, religion, etc. Again, culture could be anything. So it is basically a diversity factor in a manner that recognizes, affirms, and solidifies values for a particular experience, which is influenced by all of our lenses that we want to have, whether that's some people when they see other groups of people or see people of particular makeup have different thoughts and pre-notions of people. So the goal is to protect and preserve the dignity of the cultures that we serve, which is all cultures of the earth. Again, anyone can be identified within a culture. For this particular segment, I will do racial and ethnic culture makes up, because I cannot possibly do all of the cultural competency that we could ever see in the world, because I don't know everyone and I've never interacted with everyone. So I'll do the ones that, again, have commonalities. So I will start with African American cultural considerations. So starting off with this, we need to recognize that the historical trials and tribulations that this population has been through and experienced. So they've been demeaned, stigmatized for things outside of their control, which if you've been controlled and told what to do your entire life, you wanting to seek assistance from someone or get guidance from someone outside of your like particular culture or community often is pretty difficult and pretty harsh when you think, is this person going to exploit me? Do they have my best interest at heart? And historically, this hasn't really paid off for us. So there have been multiple instances in history where people of this population have sought out help and have been manipulated or abused while in services. So if you look all the way back, mental health treatment for African American people have been pretty harsh. Like if we want to go like, they've often been hospitalized more, been over medicated more while being hospitalized. If we want to get into like specific examples, like in the medical field, Henrietta Lacks, who is an African American woman who had cancer, they took a bit of her cancer cell without her consent, keep that in mind, and then they cultivated it and started selling it because it became the HeLa cell, which is now like a revolutionary cell, and the family has been compensated zero for that bit of unethical practice. And again, it has been documented, and she has a book called Henrietta Lacks. The Tuskegee syphilis study was where they tested syphilis and the progression of it on African Americans in poverty, and which led to more deception. So when they sought out mental health services, they were often put in institutions, residential long-term treatment facilities, and over-medicated. Therefore, their mental health was not taken seriously and not adequately addressed. So if you pump a ton of medications into somebody and don't actually get what they think and what they're experiencing and all the negative consequences that they're feeling, their willingness to want to tell you anything is pretty zero or nil, and they will keep it within and express it in ways that they deem necessary. So prior events have influenced the current view on mental health and how someone should be just able to manage it, or do it on your own, or just overcome, or let's pray more and let's get through this. So common considerations when working with this population has often been told to suppress their feelings or any shortcomings that they've had, and simply to pray or work harder and things will get better. So this has caused a slow development of the therapeutic relationship. So the therapist needs to be patient and not rush the client. Just because someone's not willing to go at the pace that you think does not mean they're resistant, and that does not mean that we need to discharge punitive or any other measures. We need to sit with them, let them get acquainted, and utilize that engagement stage very particularly, and check in with that person to make sure we're not going too quickly. Another consideration of spirituality is huge, and if possible, we need to try to include this in their treatment. However, ensure that the client aligns with the spiritual practices and that they are willing to share something so sacred with you. Again, if they do not trust you, they are not going to initiate their traditions with you, or maybe they don't even practice and you assume that they're spiritual and start referencing spiritual things. Bad moves, bad vibes. The client is the one that dictates what we do with them. So we need to be aware of the interdependence of the client with their family and community. Very community oriented. So sometimes the family may be different outside of their nuclear family. So we need to use it as a strength, because if you're super community focused, you're going to be wanting to, one, promote your family, two, promote your community, which and promote your family, as well as promotes people that are important to you. So if someone that's super important to you is a part of the treatment and thinks it's a good idea, the buy-in from that is going to be a lot better than if a professional is like, yeah, I think this is a great idea. They're going to be more receptive. So again, within that engagement and assessment phase, we need to interweave their strengths and their supports. So the client will often want to improve themselves and obtain information to help improve people in their community. Therefore, we need to be aware of how their support system is a big factor of change and can promote and motivate the person beyond it. So if you think about this for a second, there's probably a handful of people in your life, if they tell you to do something, you don't even question it. You just do it and you're like, holy cow, I just did that, and without even realizing it. Or when you think about them, they motivate you more than you could have ever imagined. So again, put yourself in a client's shoes. If you have someone that is motivating you and people that are doing it, it'll be there. So the treatment process is one that involves gaining power in the forms of knowledge, spiritual insight, and community health. So we need to keep those factors in mind and always roll back to making sure that the client's getting what they feel that they need to get out of it and not what we think that they need to get out of it. We need to go at their pace, rock with them, and keep rolling with that quote unquote resistance, if you will, or non-compliance. So moving to the next, we'll go to the Asian American cultural influences. So when working with this population, we need to always come from a curious lens and allow for the client to share their story. Again, go at their pace. Don't do anything that they don't want, and don't peel back too quick. They are very secretive and want to do what they want. So considerations here, we need to explore the importance of family and hierarchies within the client's life to help guide the decision-making. And the hierarchy that is often there is that the father or the father figure is the spokesperson. And if you get that buy-in, you get the buy-in of the rest of the family. And if you don't get that buy-in, or you're disrespectful to that person's going to be very resistant and very unwilling to want to work with you. And again, a sign of resistance isn't always that the client's not willing to work. Maybe you have overworked or stepped on something that you should have not stepped on, and they're not comfortable voicing that. So with this, we need to avoid being confrontational and allow for room for the client to disagree with us and share and assert what they think is important, so that way we can help them guide it. Again, this isn't us being an expert, us telling them what to do. This is us sitting back, walking with the client, and rocking with them in which way they want us to. Because this population finds it difficult to vocalize their needs and wants to ensure that harmony is met at all costs. So they made to agree to do things that they otherwise wouldn't want to do. And then they just don't do it. And then you're like, well, what the heck? They're regressing or they're not being compliant. Again, always check in, make sure it's what they want to do, not what you think they would want to do, or you don't coerce them into getting them to say what you want them to say. So we need to incorporate someone's spiritual beliefs into treatment as applicable. So like the healing process, like different herbs, different omens, all of those things. And we need to understand and implement important tasks, and emphasis is needing to be placed on results and prestige. So this is where results, prestige are super duper important. So if we create small goals with the client and they're accomplishing a ton of them, they're going to have more buy-in and be more motivated than ever. So we need to start off with like achievements, maybe rewards that we could possibly do it, contingency management. So if they accomplish a certain amount of goals or if they attend a certain amount of sessions, they get a reward for this. So we need to have them see that they're making progress and that they are achieving something in some way, shape, or form that is tangible, not just good old pat on the back, good job. So we need to be aware of nonverbal communication as well. Again, they don't really like confrontation, so they may not vocalize and be outspoken about what they feel is necessary for and with their treatment. So we need to explore their nonverbals to see how they're doing in the moment. Check in with them and say, hey, I noticed that this is a commonality. Like you're kind of like closed off. Is this what your intentions are? Again, opening that door, allowing for that disagreement and allowing for what they feel is necessary to happen. Now moving into the Native American culture considerations, we need to understand the importance of historical moments and the amount of oppression and trauma that this population has endured. So emphasis needs to be placed on like resilience, trauma. If they're willing, again, don't open doors you're not able to open. You don't kick them in. Let them unlock it. Let them let you in. The betrayal and loyalty is huge. So this is where you need to emphasize on that historical context, such as like forced relocations. So the Trail of Tears, like the boarding schools, stripping children from their families and making them go against what their cultural views and values are. Again, buy-in is probably going to be very difficult, or the communication could possibly be closed off at first. So an important emphasis needs to be put on the strengths perspective. Again, that's where we often come with clients, but we need to allow for the client to guide the treatment and identify strengths within their life. We can't say, oh yeah, it's really great that you just did this. We need for them to say it was really great for them to do it. Don't celebrate where it's otherwise not celebratory in their eyes. Again, walking at the client's pace, walking with them, being with them. And we need to have a consideration of, is the client ready? And if they are, let them go with it. But if not, we're not forcing anything because we don't want to trigger back any repressed like trauma or anything like that. And we need to make sure that we're respecting this. And this population communicates through storytelling. So silence is needed at times on the social worker's end to allow for appropriate expression. Again, if they're telling a lot of stories and you feel like, wow, we're not accomplishing a whole lot. Your goal is not to chit chat. Your goal is not to educate. Your goal is not to do something. Your goal is to sit your hiney there, listen, and let the client guide what they would like to do. So importance is placed on spirituality. So being interconnected with all living things and that all creations are sacred. So again, you're not going to tell them to do things that they're otherwise not comfortable with, or shrug something off because you don't believe it or you don't feel is necessary. And if a client wants to transfer based on that they don't connect with you and they want to connect with someone of the same ethnicity, let them do it, because what they're comfortable with is what they're comfortable with, and they have the right to determine what could be going on with and for their life. So the use of medicine, men, shaman, and other spiritual leaders could be important as well. And they may want to be engaged in the services as well. And you have to allow that client to dictate what their treatment looks like. But again, safety overrides all cultural considerations. So if they're trying to do something that's dangerous to somebody, then we have to challenge it. But if not otherwise, no harm, no foul. Let them do their thing. So this is where trust develops slowly. So being patient is important. It does not equate to resistance again. So if you get anything, just because the client's not going at the same pace that you want them to be going at, they're not resistant. They're just doing what they feel is comfortable and what is necessary for and with them. So do not practice direct eye contact because this can be disrespectful for some people in this population. So if they're not looking you in the eye, they're not being disrespectful. They're just practicing what is important to them and for them. So again, step outside yourself, leave your biases and your preconceived notions at the door, and let the client go. So we need to be aware of the potential expectation of self-disclosure and gift giving. So this population is friendly and generous and shows it via gifts and stories. So ethics always comes first and practice on the side of caution. Because that's the thing is if it's $1 million coin, you're not going to be like, oh yeah, it's totally disrespectful to this culture. But if somebody made it, then we might have to like be like, oh, okay. So like, was it expensive? Was it not expensive? So that is the consideration of in some certain situations, you can accept gifts based on the impacts it could potentially have on that relationship that you had once formed with the client. So again, if it is up to the considerations of the social worker, but we have to be aware of what different cultures we're interacting with and what we need to do and rock with them in certain ways. Now moving on to the Latino American cultural considerations, we need to explore the person's perspective of treatment and receiving assistance and identify key players in their life that can motivate and validate their changes. Again, there's a lot of shame that comes along with seeking treatment and assistance in their life. So if you get key buy-ins of people that they look up to or people in their life that think they need it, you can get a lot of more buy-in, a lot more reassurance, and a lot more support around what this person is trying to do with and for their considerations in their lives. So we need to generate solutions with the client to allow for them to have a sense of control in their treatment and ultimately in their life. Again, we're going to walk with the client, but maybe in this consideration, you would sit back and allow for the client to come up with all of the plans and you just help guide them and piece them together. We need to explore immigration experience or status if applicable. And if they're not comfortable sharing that, don't force it. Because a lot of times if they don't feel that they have your buy-in and that rapport is not established, they might feel like you're trying to report them or that you will utilize it against them. But if you get to the point where they're comfortable telling you and you're willing to help them along that process, it can open a lot more doors for you and a lot more rapport building and respect amongst that. But keep that in mind. If you're telling someone to do a resource and they may not have citizenship, they're going to be totally closed off. And you might be like, I'm giving you a ton of resources and you're not utilizing any of them. But if they're not a U.S. citizen, they don't want to put themselves in a situation that could potentially be dangerous. So we need to understand the expectation, again, of self-disclosure with this community as well around the family. So it may be necessary to establish rapport if you self-disclose a little bit about yourself. So respect is huge in this population, and being open is a huge connecting point about this. But if you're closed off and not willing to engage with them or willing to share experiences that you have had with them or in your life, you may have just closed the door and stopped working with this population effectively. Again, it's not with every single person from this population, but if they're asking you a question, you're like, well, why do you want to know that? You might have just ended that therapeutic relationship and robbed that person of the potential gains that they could have gotten from services. So respecting the person and respecting and knowing where the lens they're coming from and not shutting down conversations, but maybe understanding why they're asking them. So when you utilize techniques that will enable open communication and interpersonal relationship building. So meaning the sense of connection and closeness may be established before any clinical work can be done. AK, huge emphasis on the therapeutic relationship or rapport building or the engagement phase, because if they're not comfortable with you, they're not willing to share with you, you're not going to get anywhere. So we may need to take extra long, but again, whale on the brake, let the client gauge how quickly it happens. So we need to recognize and attempt to recognize the emphasis of the community involvement and achievement over personal gains and achievement. So again, this is another population that is super trying to empower and mobilize their community as a whole. So if you're not keeping that in mind, then you are kind of robbing yourself of that. So if you say this could help your community or this can help other people in your community, they're going to be for with it all the time. But if it's their view that they're only benefiting themselves, you may not have that buy-in and you may not have that motivation that otherwise would have been there if you made the connection with their community or people that are important to them within their community, such as the hierarchical of like parents and all of those things, because respect is huge. So now, common diversity considerations in general. We need to leave our beliefs at the door and expectations that we have for the client, or that pre-tell the client's story even before the client has told us. But again, it may be necessary to have those thoughts within our mind. But again, if the client isn't reinforcing, or if the client isn't following the cultures and traditions that we generally quote unquote generalize with it, don't force it on the person and don't act like that is to be true. So we need to meet the client where they're at, explore their perspective, and understand maybe if they're being shy, they're not resistant, or if there's a lot of shame around it, they're not being resistant either. They're just going at their own pace and parsing through what and navigating a system that otherwise could be new for them. Just because we're experienced within the mental health field doesn't mean that every person and every person from different cultures is as well. So we always need to allow for whatever the heck's going on to go on, as long as the client is effectively working on their self, or you are going at the client's pace. So we always allow for the client to describe their situation and never assume anything about a client. We always come from a curious lens. And we need to make sure that we're culturally competent. So we're not just sitting back and letting clients tell us everything. But again, we're not utilizing all the knowledge that we have on every single person. So we're going to have a backpack of information, but we allow for the person to take out things from our backpack and identify with and for them. So not everyone within a group of people falls into particular categories or exhibits those typical things that you might otherwise expect. We need to recognize our own privilege and how it can impact the interactions with clients. So you may potentially oppress or harm the client by assuming they are capable of things that you are. So for example, if somebody says they want to exercise more, and I'm like, oh, how about you go outside and start exercising? And my neighborhood's safe, but if they start running in the neighborhood, they may get shot, or they may feel like they run around the wrong corner, and now they're in a confrontation, or they potentially are viewed as X component, fill in the gap, like racial profile, X, Y, or Z. So again, just because I'm able to do something doesn't mean everyone else is. Or let's say I'm like, how about you want to start eating healthier? How about you go to the grocery store and buy X, Y, and Z foods? And they're like, I don't have money like that. And you're like, well, you've been spending money on all of these other things. Again, don't put your privilege lens and your view of things on other people. Let things be how they are, and let the client dictate what they want to do and what's capable and possible for them. Progress is progress, not what we want them to do and what progress or process we think they should be doing. So if you're ever in doubt, seek consultation or supervision. The difference between the two: consultation is where you consult with colleagues that have expertise in the field around that. Supervision is where you go to a particular person that is an expert in that one field that you are curious about. So that's the main difference there. So if you don't know something, be willing to look at it and say, I don't know everything and I'm not capable of knowing everything. And that's okay, because I am here to learn and I'm coming from a curious lens. So that is what I am able to do. So this will help eliminate bias, lack of knowledge, counter-transference if you're doing that, or if the client's experiencing transference from you. Again, difference between a counter-transference and transference. Transference is where the client transfers something to you. Counter-transference is where you transfer it to the client, and it's counter to the progress of the therapeutic relationship. So that is what we have to look here and there. And again, this list isn't exhaustive, but it's just common considerations that we could see within particular cultures and groups of people. Question 1. A social worker has been meeting with a 26-year-old male at an outpatient clinic upon referral from CPS for the past 3 months. The man has been willing to discuss ways to change his alcohol use with the social worker, but has not been applying the strategies they have identified in therapy. The social worker has been seeking supervision around her struggles and is unsure what to do with the man. Which stage of treatment best explains this situation? When you have your answer, type the word happy into the chat. Opening the polls. Thirty more seconds. All right, closing the polls. The majority think it is D. Second place is C. Third place is A. Fourth place is B. So let's look at it. So we're a social worker, outpatient clinic, 26-year-old male, 3 months. The man has been willing to discuss ways to change his alcohol use, has not been applying the strategies they have identified in therapy. Social worker seeking supervision around the struggles, is not sure what to do. So, engagement, establishing rapport and trust with the client to understand what they would like to work on. Assessment, gathering information from the client, better assist them, such as resources, strengths, and supports. Planning, when the social worker and client identify ways or steps for the individual to change or improve their situation. Intervention, when the client utilizes techniques to improve their situation and addresses any barriers that exist. Quick review: social worker, outpatient clinic, 26-year-old male, 3 months, willing to discuss ways, but has not been applying any of the strategies. So they haven't developed a plan quite yet. So we're going to rule out intervention here, because intervention would mean that the social worker and the guys established a plan and that the guy is willing to take the steps to make sure it is done. The man has simply just been willing to discuss ways in his situation with the social worker. There's no plans, no interventions, no delivery yet. So we're going to rule out planning because he's not been willing to develop a plan just yet. He's just willing to discuss his situation, what his point of view is, and what he is trying to do in particular. He's done nothing and has not done any actions to get this thing done because he's not been applying the strategies, but he's been willing to identify them and willing to discuss his situation. So that begs the question, are we building relationship with this guy still, trying to get rapport and buy-in so that way he is utilizing the things that he's trying to do in services? Or are we assessing to gather more information about this guy's situation, what resources, strengths, and supports that he can have in his particular situation to get him to where he needs to go? So we would rule out assessment and we would go with engagement because the rapport is not established there. He's just willing to discuss his situation in ways that he can change, but he's not having that rapport and getting things done with us yet. We haven't established a plan. We haven't developed an intervention plan, and he's not doing the things. So again, rapport building can go on for as long as we particularly want to because he's not coming in on his own free will. He's referred by an entity outside of him, so he's just coming to appease us. So it is going to be engagement because we haven't established rapport and that trust for him to be willing to get us going. So that is where you have to identify what in particular is going on in the situation. And yes, he's willing to discuss the situation, but he's not established a plan and he's not pulling the trigger and getting things done. And we're not gathering information around the supports and resources. He's simply just saying, here's ways that I can change my alcohol use, and has done nothing with them yet. So that's how we look at that question in particular. Question 2. A social worker at a family agency is meeting a couple and their 8-year-old son for their third session. The social worker has gathered information regarding the family and knows that the family would like to identify ways to cope with the past abuse inflicted by the mother when she would get into manic episodes. The family is motivated to change, but has been reluctant to discuss ways that they can change. What stage of treatment is the social worker and family most likely in? A, assessment, B, engagement, C, planning, D, intervention. When you have your answer, type the word tricky into the chat. Opening the polls. 30 more seconds. All right, slapping the polls shut. The majority think it is A. Second place is B. Third is C. No one touched D. Let's look at it. Social worker, family agency. We are meeting with a family, 8-year-old, well, couple, assumed it to be a family, 8-year-old son, third session. So it's not a particular length of time, but it's a length of time nonetheless. Social worker has gathered information regarding the family and knows that they would like to cope with the abuse that was inflicted by the mother when she used to get into her manic episodes. The family is motivated to change, key detail, has been reluctant to discuss ways to change. Again, assessment is going to be gathering information from the client to better assist them, such as resources, history, strengths, supports, etc. Any objective information that we can have to help them get to where they need to go. Engagement, establishing rapport and gaining the trust of the family to help them get where they would like to go. Planning is going to be where we come up with a particular plan for the client, or let's just be synonymous here, the family to achieve their identified goal. So steps for them to follow. Intervention, when the family utilizes techniques to improve their situation and addresses any barriers that exist. So, quick review: social worker, family agency, couple, 8-year-old son, third session, already gathered information about what their goal is. Family is motivated, but they're not willing to talk about practical ways that they can get this bad cat done. So intervention's immediately going to be shut down because we don't have a plan in place, and we aren't discussing steps of how they can actually get to where they're trying to go. We are not going to be in the engagement phase because we have their buy-in, we have their trust, and they're talking to us about what they would like to accomplish in services while with us. So we've already broached that. We've already got that rapport established, and we already have that working relationship. They trust us. Third session, a little quicker than the last one. But again, they're already talking about ways and their goal for treatment. So, So are we coming up with practical steps and ways to get this done, or are we still gathering information about their situation so that way we can come up with the practical steps? So in this question in particular, we aren't coming up with steps because the family has been reluctant to discuss ways of actually changing. So the key emphasis here is that they're not really willing to do that. So we can't technically be in the planning phase yet. We're still in the assessment phase where we're helping them gather the needed information and getting to know them a little more. So that way we can help come up with practical steps with and for them. So we're in the assessment phase of gathering more information of what ways they feel that they could do this. Because again, They've identified what they want to do, but they haven't come up with any ways that we can help them plan to get this stuff done yet. That is how we look at that question in particular. Question 3. A social worker in a community mental health clinic has been working with a 35-year-old female for the past year regarding depression. The woman would experience depressive episodes multiple times per week, which consisted of isolating, self-harm, and hypersexuality. The woman has been utilizing positive strategies throughout treatment to improve her mood. The woman still struggles with urges, but is able to handle them in a positive manner. What stage of treatment best explains the woman's situation? When you have your answer, type the words "I can" in the chat. Opening the polls. Thirty more seconds. Slapping the polls shut. The majority think it is D. Second place is B. Third is C. No one touched A. Let's look at it. Social worker, community mental health clinic, 35-year-old female, past year for depression. Key emphasis, past year. So that is going to be our length of time in reference. She would experience depressive moods multiple times per week, which consisted of isolating, self-harm, and hypersexuality. Woman has been utilizing positive strategies throughout treatment to improve mood. Woman struggles with urges but is able to handle them in a positive manner. So assessment is going to be gathering information about the client's past strengths, resources, and supports. Evaluation, reviewing the work, that the social worker and client have had, and identifying ways for the client to maintain their progress, termination from the social worker and client and their work together because the client has achieved their goals, intervention, when the client is utilizing strategies to achieve their goals and are working to address any barriers in their life. Quick review: social worker, community mental health clinic, 35-year-old female, 1 year. She's depressed. She was isolating. She was self-harming. She had hypersexuality. She's now utilizing positive strategies to improve her mood, and she's still struggling with urges, but she's able to handle them in a positive manner. What are we looking at here? So we're in agreement that we're not looking at assessment because we're not looking at any additional gathering of information. She already has a plan in place, and she's delivering the dang thing and walking the steps out. So it's not going to be evaluation because the client is still doing her thing and we haven't terminated her yet. So she's still in services in some capacity here. So she's utilizing the skills. She's still meeting with us and she's still trying to identify ways to combat all of the urges that she experiences. She still has some. She's handling them in a positive manner. But over how long of a period of time, it's unknown. So we can't assume that we're about to evaluate her. And again, we're not talking about termination because she's still working on and finding ways to improve her situation in some way, shape, or form. So she's still kind of in the intervention stage where she's starting to utilize the strategies. She's found some success with the strategies, but she's still trying to pan out things. And we may be starting to talk about how ways she can maintain the progress that she's obtained. But at this time, she's still in the intervention phase because she's utilizing the strategies and wants a longer period of time to make sure that she gets all of her goals met. And then we can start talking about termination, and then we can start evaluating with this client. So that's how we'd look at that question in particular. Question 4. Social worker in an outpatient clinic is completing an intake assessment with a couple and their 2 children who recently immigrated. When the social worker inquired about substance use in the family, the parents report that alcohol use is a part of the traditions of their country of origin. The parents report that they will drink alcohol as a family and at times will become intoxicated. What would be the best thing for the social worker to do in this situation? A, provide information to the family on the negative impacts that alcohol can have on them. B, contact Child Protective Services. C, continue with the intake assessment and research the family's country of origin to better prepared for the next session. D, respect the family's cultural beliefs and continue to identify what the family would like to work on. When you have your answer, type the word roll into the chat. Opening the polls. 30 seconds. Slap on the pull shot. The majority think it is B. Second place is D. Third is C. Fourth is A. Let's look at it. Social worker, community outpatient clinic, completed intake assessment. Couple, 2 children, recently immigrated. Social worker inquired about substance use in the family. The parents report that they'll utilize alcohol because it's a part of their traditions, and the parents report they will drink alcohol as a family and at times become intoxicated. What would be the best thing for the social worker to do in this situation? And this is an application question, why it's a clinical breakdown, and we need to respond to it in some way, shape, or form. So let's whip out the acronym to help us guide to that answer. Provide information to the family on negative impacts that alcohol can have on them. Educate. Contact Child Protective Services. Safety. Continue with the intake assessment and research the family's country of origin to be better prepared. Intervene why the social worker is doing an action in some way, shape, or form. D, respect the family's cultural beliefs and continue to identify what they would like to work on. Intervene why? Because we're respecting it, and then continuing on to gather information. So that is where we need to look at it. So quick review: social worker, outpatient clinic, intake, first initial visit, couple, 2 children, recently immigrated, alcohol is a part of their culture. They will drink alcohol as a family, kids are included, in this and become intoxicated. So let's peel this bad cat back. So we're not going to be respecting the family's beliefs and continue to identify what they would like to work on because there is an inkling of intoxication of alcohol within the situation. We're not going to continue with the intake and research later on because there is a consideration that there's alcohol and there's intoxication within the entire family. And we don't want kids drinking. We don't know how old the kids are. So we need to keep that in mind as we're looking through it. We're not going to be looking at information because let's say we give them information. They're like, we don't give a crap. This is our culture. We're doing whatever the heck we want. Sit back. You ain't trying to impose stuff on me. So this answer would be contacting CPS because safety overrides cultural considerations every single time. Keep that in mind. That is how we look at that question in particular. Question 5. A social worker at a family agency is completing an intake assessment with a 29-year-old Black male who engages in services to help improve his anxiety. The man appears uneasy and avoids making eye contact with the social worker. During the middle of the intake, the man blurts out, "You aren't going to put me in a hospital, are you?" What should the social worker do next in this situation? A, acknowledge the client's feelings of anxiety and continue on with the assessment. B, explore the reasoning behind the client's comments to better understand his point of view. C, provide information on the process of service delivery to the client to help ease his mind. D, facilitate discussion around how Black people have been historically hospitalized and ensure the client that the social worker understands his view. When you have your answer, type the word culture into the chat. Opening the polls. Thirty more seconds. Slapping the poll shut. The majority think it is B. Second place is A. Third is C. Fourth is D. Let's look at it. Social worker, family agency, intake. So initial 29-year-old black male. Engages in services because he is anxious. Man is uneasy and avoids eye contact. During the middle of the intake, so abruptly, the man blurts out, "You aren't going to put me in a hospital, are you?" So, again, application question because clinical write-up, and we need to be able to respond to it in some way, shape, or form. So, acknowledge the client's feelings of anxiety and continue on. Intervene. So, trick to be feelings, because again, we're acknowledging the client's feelings, but again, we're just throttling down and saying, screw you, we have a job to do. Explore the reasoning behind the client's comments to better understand his views, feelings. Provide information on the process of service delivery to the client to ease his mind. Educate why we're providing him a piece of information so that way we can calm him. Facilitate a discussion on how Black people have been historically hospitalized and ensure the client understands his view. Educate again why we're providing a piece of information, but as well as informing him that we're with him. So, quick review: family agency, intake, 29-year-old black male, services for anxiety. He's uneasy and avoids the eye contact. Middle of the intake, you aren't going to put me in a hospital, are you? So we're not just going to facilitate a discussion on how Black people are historically hospitalized to ease his mind. That's outside of line, and maybe that's a discussion that we can have. But bad moves, bad vibes. We're not going to just jump into historical perspective and assume that's why he's making the comments. We need to explore his situation prior to that. So providing information to how services look like is not going to answer his question of are you going to be hospitalized, and it's not going to entirely help him out. So are we going to acknowledge his feelings and just throttle down and say, well, intake's important? Or are we going to say, so it seems like you're pretty concerned about the hospital. Where did that come from? It's the middle of the intake. Is it something you said, or is it something that I need to assess for maybe psychosis? So correct answer here. Explore the reasoning behind the comments. Again, we have to start where the client is and understand why he had that comment and where it's coming from. Because maybe it is something we said that triggered him, but maybe it's psychotic and hearing things that aren't otherwise being said during the session. So we have to start where the client is, get what he's doing, and then go from there. So that's how we'd answer that question in particular. Question 6. Social worker at an outpatient clinic is working with a Black mother and her 15-year-old son. The mother reports that she has been struggling with managing her son's behavior and that things have gotten worse since the death of her husband 6 months ago. The son reports that he feels like he cannot trust his mother and that he better connects with his pastor. The mother discussed how she would like to better understand her son and to improve their communication. The mother and son would like to bring the pastor in to inform the social worker on biblical teachings and that could guide their work together. What is the best way for the social worker to respond in this situation? A, inform the mother and her son that the pastor would not be allowed since she feels comfortable assisting them alone. B, allow for the mother and son to bring in their pastor to help guide their treatment. C, assist the mother and son to identify positive strategies to improve their situation. D, connect the mother and son with other families who are struggling with similar issues. So when you have your answer, type the word courage into the chat. Opening the polls. Thirty more seconds. Slapping the polls shut. The majority think it is B. Close second is C. Third place is A. Fourth place is D. Let's look at it. Social worker, outpatient clinic, black mother, 15-year-old son. Mother reports that she's been struggling to manage the son's behavior, and things have gotten worse since her husband's death 6 months ago. So 6 months is the length of time. Son reports he feels like he cannot trust his mother, connects with that pastor. Mother discussed how she'd like to better understand and would like to improve their communication styles. Mother and son would like to bring their pastor to help improve the situation. Again, we're looking at a smooth application question. So inform the mother and her son that the pastor would not be allowed since she's comfortable. Intervene, because we are telling them we're going to do it anyhow. Allow for the mother and son to bring their pastor feelings. We're recognizing what they're saying and where they would like to come from and not forcing what we think is appropriate on them. Assist with them to identify something is intervene, but it's the first session. We don't really know a whole lot. And son's not talking with mom in session because he doesn't trust her. So we can't work with them to improve their situation because we aren't there yet. D, connect the mother and son with other families who are struggling with similar issues. Intervene. Why? Because we're connecting them with them. If it was another professional, it'd be facilitate. But again, connecting with other people is going to be intervene because it's an action on our end. Quick review. Outpatient clinic, black mother, 15-year-old son. She's struggling to manage. 6 months ago is when the father died. Son doesn't trust mom, wants pastor. Communication needs to be improved. Mother and son want the pastor to come in. What do we need to do? So we're not going to connect them to other families that have similar issues because the issue is communication, but not every other family wants their pastor to come in to help improve it. So they're telling us the rubric for us to be able to help them in some way, shape, or form. So we're not going to be able to assist them with anything at this given moment because we don't have any buy-ins, because we're trying to jump too quick into action and it's not our job. So watch your hand. We need to trust them, let them guide the session, and let them do what they feel is necessary for and with them. A would also be incorrect because we're invalidating the feelings and the perspective of the clients. They told you what they want and how they can help be addressed adequately and improve their situation. We're like, screw you. I'm a qualified professional, have a license. I don't need your pastor. I'm going to invalidate you and tell you what you need for yourself and what your situation should look like rather than me sitting down. I'm a hiney, listening to you and getting the stuff done. So B would be correct in feelings because we are recognizing the perspective of what the clients are telling us and following through with that. So that is why that's the correct answer. They told us we want him to come in and we're going to have him come in because that's going to be our lead in to build rapport and engage the clients in another way, shape, or form. So that's how we'd answer that question in particular. 7, a hospital social worker is working with a family and their 12-year-old daughter. They are originally from Kenya. The family reports that their daughter has been isolating, having difficulty sleeping in periods of low mood. Social worker asks the daughter what has been going on in her situation and finds out that their parents plan to change her body based on tradition. Upon further discovery, the family plans to mutilate her genitals to prepare her for womanhood. What should the social worker do next? A, contact Child Protective Services. B, provide information to the family on the dangers of female genital mutilation. C, respect the family's cultural traditions and differences. D, connect the family with medical services to assist in the procedure. When you have your answer, type the word help into the chat. Opening the polls. 30 more seconds. Slapping the poll shut. The majority think it is A. Second place is B. No one touched C or D. Let's look at it. Hospital social worker, family, 12-year-old daughter, originally from Kenya. Family reports daughter's isolating, having low moods, and difficulty sleeping. Social worker asks the daughter what's going on, finds out they want to change her body based on tradition, and family plans to mutilate her genitals to prepare her for womanhood. Another application question. Contact Child Protective Services. Safety, because there is an actually concern here. We're in a hospital. She's clinically depressed. And keep in mind, we're in a hospital, so the depression must be severe enough to get her into a hospital. Keep that in mind. Provide information, education, respect the family's cultural differences, intervene, connect the family with medical services, facilitate. Why? Because it's another professional. Quick review. Hospital social worker, family and 12-year-old daughter, originally from Kenya. Daughter's depressed and isolated, in low mood and not sleeping very well. Family's trying to change her body based on tradition, and her genitals are potentially going to be mutilated. What are we going to do here? Not going to respect the right, because, again, even though they have cultural traditions, they're now in the United States and have to respect our norms and actually laws, because to mutilate a child's genitals is against the law. So that is ruled out there, and connecting them to another professional is like almost invalidating the daughter's feelings and saying, screw it, buckle down, sister, this is what's supposed to be happening. But that is not our goal. So do we want to provide information on the dangers so that way they don't do it, or are we going to contact CPS so we have ongoing monitoring because we are in a hospital and it would prevent the family? So in this instance, if we provide them education or information, they're going to do what they think necessary. So whether we recommend it or not, we need to get CPS involved, because we're in a hospital. Our monitoring system and our ability to be able to do that is not possible. So we need to get CPS involved, so there's some follow-up, some monitoring, as well as this child's not going to get her genitals mutilated and potentially scar her for life, if not if she's already mentally scarred because she's now in a hospital with clinical depression. So that's how we look at that question in particular. And again, do not let cultural values and traditions override your ability to see that someone is in danger. So let's look at question 8. Social worker working in a private practice has been working with an Asian family for 1 month who engage in services to help improve communication styles among the family. The social worker has noticed that whenever he facilitates discussion around areas of improvement, the father will shut down the discussion and begin discussing positive experiences of communication that the family has had. What is the best thing for the social worker to do in this situation? A, allow for the father to discuss positive experiences to continue establishing rapport with the family. B, utilize circular questioning to gather more information about the family. C, recognize the father's behavior of diverting the conversation away from improvement areas. D, suggest ways that the family can improve their communication styles. And when you have your answer, type the word yes into the chat. Opening the polls. Thirty more seconds. Closing down the polls. The majority think it is A. Second place is B. Third is C. Fourth place is D. Let's look at it. Social worker, private practice, working with Asian family, 1 month, engaged in services, those communication styles. So 1 month is our length of time of reference. Social worker has noticed that whenever he facilitates discussion, shut down and begin discussing positive instances. So deflecting any negativity, whipping out that positivity. So again, we are going to see application. So let's peel out the acronym to help us guide. Allow for the father to discuss positive experiences to continue establishing rapport. Feelings, why? Because it's gauged on a rapport and it's letting the father discuss his perspective. And again, in Asian families, typically the father or the father figure is going to be the person that determines what goes on and what in particular is happening. Utilize circular questioning to gather more information. Intervene, because we're utilizing the technique of modality to get more information. Recognize the father's behavior, diverting the conversation away of the improvement. Intervene. D, suggest ways that the family can improve, is going to be intervene as well. So, quick review. Private practice, Asian family, 1 month, communication styles, social workers facilitating discussion, trying to get things going. Father's only talking about positives. What do we need to do? So we're not going to step in and become an expert and tell them how they can improve their communication styles, because that's bad news, bad vibes, and we've only known them for a month. So what impression is that going to give in this question here? So recognize the father's behavior, bad news, why father's the key stakeholder in this. And as long as we get his buy-in and have him feel comfortable, we would allow for that way to get in. Because again, he's going to be the stakeholder and the gatekeeper to effective communication and effective therapeutic relationship. So if we get his buy-in and get him there, if we challenge him, that is going to be bad news, bad vibes there. So are we going to utilize circular questioning to have the entire family overtalk the father, or are we going to let the father take the lead and allow for him to begin the session? Not going to overstep, and we're going to respect those family cultures and traditions and allow for him to be a stakeholder and a gatekeeper in progress. And that is how we would look at that question. Question 9. A social worker at an outpatient clinic is completing an intake with a 36-year-old Asian female who engages in services with concerns of excessive worry. The woman reports that she feels like she does not have any control in her life and that her family dictates everything she does. The woman reports that she feels like she has to take care of everything but feels like no one is there to take care of her. At the end of the session, the client appears anxious and overwhelmed and states, "You aren't going to tell my family anything I said, are you?" What should the social worker do next in this situation? A, inform the woman that depending on who is paying for the services would depend on the disclosure rules. B, inform the woman that the social worker will not tell anyone about anything she shares in services. C, inform the woman that the social worker will only tell people that she provides consent for. D, inform the woman that the social worker cannot guarantee confidentiality can be kept. When you have your answer, type one thing that you are grateful for at this given moment. Opening the polls. Thirty more seconds. Slap on the poll shut. So the majority think it is C. Second place is B. Third is D. No one touched A. So let's get into it. Social worker, outpatient clinic, completed an intake with a 36-year-old Asian female who engages in services. Excessive worry is the concern. She feels like she does not have any control in her life, and her family dictates everything that she does. She doesn't have any buy-in. She has to take care of everyone. No one takes care of her. So some feelings of being overwhelmed. At the end of the session, the client appears anxious and overwhelmed. You're not going to tell my family anything I said, are you? So this is going to be more of a reasoning question because it's ethics. So that's pretty much what we are looking at. So A, inform the woman that depending on who is paying for her services would depend on who discloses. No, if there's no consent on file, we cannot share information with someone regardless if they're cashing it out or not, because that just because you can pay does not mean that you have access to whatever you're paying for. So in that thing, you have to explore no consent, no disclosure. So inform the woman that you do not tell anything she shares. That's incorrect, because there are going to be particular times where you have to tell people outside of session of what's going on within session in particular situations, especially if she signs a release. You can't say, I'm not going to tell anyone anything. And then she signs a release for it. And then we exchange. And then she's like, well, why does this person know? And you're like, well, you signed a release for this person. So that's how we look at that. So now, C, inform the woman that the social worker only tell people that she provides consent for, or D, inform the woman that the social worker cannot guarantee confidentiality can be kept. So we are going to rule out C, because where there are going to be particular times in treatment where, regardless if she provided consent or not, we're going to tell. That is going to be harm to self, harm to others, that is going to be abuse, and that is going to be neglect. So we are not going to set her up and tell her anything you tell me is confidential unless you sign the consent form. Because if she says, hey, I'm going to blow off my brother's head, that's going to definitely be something we have to tell somebody. So again, take it slow, take it at the pace, and think things through before picking your answer. D is going to be the correct one because it's absolutely true. Because whether she provides consent to CPS or APS or the cops, we're still going to have to call them. So that's how you look at that question in particular. Don't ever second guess yourself. So the last question that we're looking at, a social worker at a community mental health clinic has been working with a 35-year-old Native American female who engaged in services to improve her ability to form relationships for 1 year. The client has been able to go on multiple intimate relationship dates without much anxiety. The client's been in a healthy relationship for the past 4 months. Social worker and client feel that she's ready for discharge. At their last session together, the client gives the social worker a necklace that she has made to show her appreciation for her efforts in the process. What is the best thing for the social worker to do in this situation? A, accept the gift, as it would be more detrimental to decline the gift. B, thank the client for her generosity and inform her why it would be unethical to accept the gift. C, thank the client for her generosity and gather information on the meaning of the gift. D, decline the gift. When you have your answer, type one thing that you learned from the session today. Opening the polls. Thirty more seconds. Slapping the polls shut. The majority think it is C. Second place is B. Third is A. No one wanted to decline the gift. So let's look at it. Community Mental Health Clinic. 35-year-old Native American female. She engaged in services to improve relationship building. This was 1 year ago. She's been able to go on multiple dates, no anxiety. Progress has been made. She's in a healthy relationship for 4 months. So, another key detail of length of time. Social worker and client think it's ready for discharge. At the last session together, so very last time that we're going to interact, the client gives the social worker a necklace that she has made to show her appreciation in her efforts. She's made the necklace. So let's look at it. Accept the gift as it would be more detrimental. Thank the client for her generosity. Inform her why it'd be unethical to accept the gift. Thank the client for her generosity and gather more information on the meaning of the gift. D, decline the gift. So we're not going to automatically decline it. That's just rude, crude, and socially unacceptable. That is not what we're thinking here. So she's Native American, and that culture, typically, it's very based on storytelling, gift giving, and everything like that to show appreciation around this. So that is where we have to look at it. So we're not just going to thank the client for the generosity and inform her why it'd be unethical. Again, that's shutting her down and closing off any dialogue or disclosure within that. So do we want to outright accept the gift because it could be more detrimental to decline the gift? Or do we want to gather more information around what the gift means, how it was made, and what the probability of everything like that would be? So with that, we are not just going to outright accept the gift. We still need to gather a touch more information based on what was it made with, what is the mean to her, and all those other extracurricular things, given Based on that information, we may be able to accept it because she made it, but did she make it out of diamonds that are worth $100,000 a piece? And then we're accepting a $200,000 or so necklace. So that's the thing that we would have to keep in mind. We needed just a touch bit more information, and that is the thing that you would have to keep in mind there. So that's how you would look at that question. And I added that detail of that she made it to see if I could trip people up.